everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Guys, today we're going to be talking about the lunar eclipse that's going to be taking place in the sign of Taurus in early November. Wanted to get a head start on that. Hopefully you guys already saw the solar eclipse video. Those of you guys who are new to my channel, welcome. I'm a Western astrologer with an emphasis on working with the Sabian symbols along with the art of tarot. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's take a brief look just to give you guys a heads up in terms of what is coming energetically with this second eclipse that is kind of completing eclipse season, at least here for 2022. Now, if you guys saw my most recent video, you saw me talking about the solar eclipse that was taking place in Scorpio. It was taking place in the early degrees of Scorpio in conjunction with Venus. So we don't know what's going to happen yet. So if you guys haven't taken a look at that, do watch. But this is going to be the kind of closing eclipse for that 2-week window. Now, we've had several eclipses in Taurus. Okay, so if you guys think back to the fall of 2021, we had an eclipse that was around 26 degrees of Taurus last year. So this is kind of similar to that in a way. Although there are some very different planetary aspects that are going on. Obviously, eclipses, right? They come in pairs. Sometimes we get lucky and we get an extra one, but generally speaking, there's usually about 4 eclipses a year. They're spaced 6 months apart. They bring new beginnings and they also bring endings. So where solar eclipses are more action-oriented and they're more about starting new things, seeing that we need to kind of tie up loose ends wherever the solar eclipse is taking place in our chart. The lunar eclipse is wrapping something up, really, that we've been working with since the better part of spring of 2022. So this particular eclipse is in Taurus, and we know that because the sun and the moon are in opposition to each other. So a lunar eclipse is a full moon, right? But eclipses are lunations on steroids. So as if full moons were not complex and intense enough, having one during the time of an eclipse is going to pack a little bit more of a punch. Now, the lunations that we've been having have been very interesting. The last full moon that we had in Scorpio, the last full moon that we had in Aries, very hectic, kind of challenging because it had some aspects to Chiron. So since that full moon, we're going to feel the energy build because we're going to have this solar eclipse soon, and then we're going to have the lunar eclipse in early November. So the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse will be on November 8th, 2022. Here on the West Coast, it's going to be taking place at 3:02 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 6:02 a.m. Eastern time. Obviously, I know you have people watching all over the world. You can adjust your time zones accordingly. It's very likely you're going to be feeling this one prior, though. Okay, so the week or two in between eclipses, anything goes. I always say it's kind of like a grab bag of things that can happen in our life because the energy is renewing itself. Things are turning over, and we're seeing that there is a need to start some things with the solar eclipse and finish some things with this lunar eclipse. You guys have seen my channel, right? Like, I'm not gonna candy coat things. I'm gonna be kind of between the eyes with how I interpret the astrology. This one's a bit wild. And my feeling on this is, on one hand, we're super equipped to handle this full moon because we can in general, right? We're here to, supersede our astrological placements and transits. And, I think the astrology serves to kind of help us level up, at least on a soul level. But I feel like we're equipped because we've been dealing with this particular aspect, the Saturn-Uranus square, really for 2 years now. So many of us, we've had our passports stamped to Saturn square Uranus and back, especially the fixed signs. So whatever takes place as a result of this eclipse, like whatever grand finale happens in your life, whatever breakthrough takes place, likely it's like not going to be a surprise, right? That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting, because usually Uranian aspects, there is an element of surprise. And I look at this and I'm like, it doesn't really surprise me. The writing's kind of on the wall that there has been a tug of war where we have felt like we're in between a rock and a hard place for some time with this square. Now, the eclipse obviously has the moon in Taurus, which I like. The moon is exalted in this sign. Why? Because the moon is changeable, right? Associated with Cancer or the 4th house. So when it moves into the fixed earth sign of Taurus, the emotions are stable, the home is stable, resources are stable. So we like seeing the moon in that sign, especially when it is as close as it is to its own north node. Now, the north and the south node are points in the skies that are almost like shadow or invisible planets, right? Let's just call it that. And they kind of point in the direction of where we're going collectively for soul growth and what we're moving away from and releasing with the south node. So when we see when we see a lunar eclipse with the moon conjunct its own node in its exaltation, not too bad, right? It's kind of suggesting that, hey, whatever is happening because we want to create more stability. We want to create more security, more resources, more money, more pleasure, right? Taurus is about pleasure and art and beauty and feeling comfortable. So, this is where things get kind of like bittersweet. It is sandwiched between its own node and Uranus. In fact, if you look at this, it's just less than a degree in terms of conjunction. So it's not exact, it's 16 degrees, but it's pretty darn close. And Uranus destabilizes. That's what it does. And it is not happy in the sign of Taurus because Taurus wants consistency, right? So when Uranus moves in, it's like, okay, we're going to go through a period of time, we're going to build up pressure, and then the pressure kind of pops, and we see something kind of snap. This has been challenging because I think that we've seen highs and lows, right? Look at what's been going on with the markets. Inflation rises, prices start to come down, things rise again, prices come down. So it's a lot of inconsistency that's like really tearing up a lot of people's pocketbooks, their investments, and also our nervous systems and our physical bodies because of the stress that we have been under emotionally, right? So that conjunction makes me feel like in some situations, it's going to feel like the rug is just pulled out from underneath us, wherever Taurus is in your chart. And at a 16, it is definitely dealing with homes, housing, okay? Like the housing market is something that we want to watch. Anything in regards to physical structures, how we have done things for long periods of time. I think like tradition is associated with 16, our roots, our ancestors, where we come from. And there can be this feeling of uprooting that happens. Now, Uranus and Taurus does have rocks and rattles and rolls relating to the element of earth. So we could see earthquakes, we could see electrical issues, outages. I've seen a lot of this with the Saturn-Uranus square personally. And I'm anticipating that on one hand, because this is a full moon, it's wrapping something up. But on the other hand, it's wrapping something up and it's kind of like this not so subtle nudge from the universe that's really asking you, where have you been experiencing the Saturn-Uranus square? Where have you been holding on too tight and too rigid and unwilling to kind of make changes? Or where have you been making some significant cutbacks or separating yourself from old goals or separating yourself from old friends, or where has society kind of had separation, right? Saturn in Aquarius does that. We saw that from 2020 on as Saturn went in and out of the sign of Aquarius. Each time that was a lockdown. So we saw that was like the preparation for Saturn fully moving into Aquarius at the end of 2020, setting us up for what would ultimately be 2 years of more social isolation as we go through the pandemic. So I think that this is now the kind of the compounded effect of several years of experiencing slowdown, economic stress, also anything in regards to delays with like goods. I think we're going to see more supply chain issues with these Saturn-Uranus squares, shortages, especially of particular products and food, okay, because Taurus deals with food. So we're going to see that there can be delays getting shipments. We may not be able to get our favorite products that are in stores. And I'm not like a fear monger. That's not what I'm doing. But like I'm noticing this. Like there's been several times over the last like week or two that I'll go to the store and I have something on my list to pick up and it's like gone. Like you can't find that product anywhere. And I've noticed it's been particularly like certain meat products that are like short or you just can't find certain things. So I think that this is probably a sign that this is going to be starting back up again in certain areas. I think that because the moon also deals with where we're at collectively, this eclipse is suggesting that there is a need for a collective shakeup right now, and that this collective shakeup that's going to be happening is really happening to liberate us, to free us somehow. Maybe it's freeing us from pressure and tension in regards to what we feel like we cannot go out and do, what we cannot enjoy. And it does have this feeling of like old versus new, right? Because Saturn is that long-standing kind of committed way of doing things. And Uranus is just like, let's do something wild, let's do something different. It wants to throw a monkey wrench into things. So in this situation with this eclipse, even though I think it's pretty decent in Taurus and I know it means well, it is going to be very emotionally or financially destabilizing, okay? And I've said in previous videos that Taurus and Scorpio, it does deal with our money, our resources, our possessions, what we hold, like our spending power. And then Scorpio deals with like loans and banking and our borrowing power. So there is this highlight of collectively, there can be collective panic or freak out or emotional kind of turbulence or meltdowns that are happening as a result of things in regards to money that's owed or changes that are happening within the Scorpio realm. So that can be higher interest rates, people having to pay things back sooner than they anticipated, having less money in our savings account or having less money that's coming in from support. So this can be spousal support, government support, but this is also taxes. We're going to hear more about taxes as a result of some of these eclipses. You know, we just had a solar eclipse in Scorpio. I say that it's going to be after this eclipse is going to be after that. So I'm anticipating we're going to find out more about changes in the taxes that are going to be taking place in the spring of next year as we see that solar eclipse in Scorpio fully kind of transpire. I don't know. I think that, you know, Venus is the ruler of this because Venus rules Taurus, and we're still looking at a debilitated Venus. Venus is in Scorpio, so Venus is not entirely thrilled being in a Mars/Pluto related sign. So that tells me that with Venus in opposition to the moon, right, there is panic in regards to what we need, what we don't have. And Scorpio deals with, you know, joint resources, change, transformation, intimacy. It can be about investments, but it can also be about secrets and scandal and things that are scary and things that go on behind the scenes that we can't see. So watching Venus stand in opposition to the moon tells me that we're going to feel like certain necessities are out of reach, right? And also we're watching Venus in opposition to Uranus. Now we will see for several days, Venus will make oppositions to Uranus all the way up until the time of the eclipse. So we see changes of fate, right? Venus-Uranus changes with relationships, changes with friendships, shifts in our values, and they're not comfortable because it's going through a Mars-related sign. So there can be more combativeness, more conflict, more scandal, you know, things that are being uncovered that we were not aware of that can be very destabilizing, and the psychological effect that it has on us because it's in the sign of Scorpio. Now, just shortly after this eclipse, there will also be a Sun-Mercury cazimi. So this is one of those situations where I think, you know, anything goes. It could be up to a week before or 2 weeks after that you're seeing some of this stuff kind of play out. And similar to what I said with the Taurus eclipse, right? Because we had the Scorpio eclipse. When we looked at the Scorpio eclipse, we were still having to take into consideration what was going on with Taurus because Venus was strongly involved. Some similarities here. So these eclipses are suggesting that, you know, we kind of really do have to do our due diligence to look at the axis, both of Taurus and Scorpio, to kind of get a bigger picture of what's going on. Now, if you guys notice, not only is Venus ahead of the sun, so technically, you know, the cazimi has kind of ended. That was going on with the solar eclipse in Scorpio. And Venus is still within 10 degrees of the sun, so it's still under the beams. Basically, this is where a planet gets kind of like burned up, and there can be a sense of it being so close to the sun that it's like almost overwhelming, and it takes away some of the more positive characteristics that we may see from Venus. Essentially, Venus is not going to start being more so visible until it's getting into Sagittarius. So that's when we're going to start reaping some more positive benefits from Venus. So Venus is still kind of like not helpful at the time of this eclipse. So we've got Venus oppose the moon, so we don't know what we we don't know how to nurture, we're having a difficult time coping, you know, we're afraid to kind of open up and express feelings. We've got Venus in opposition to Uranus, so we're like, well, that blow up happened in a relationship, or like, wow, that money just went quick, or, you know, there goes my investment type of vibes. But Venus is also going to be in a hard angle to Saturn. So this is bringing up here a fixed T-square. And it's interesting because Saturn is like the focal point. So I'm using a lot of astrological rules here as I look at this. Like traditionally, you really want to focus on the ruler of the eclipse and see what's going on with the ruler. In opposition to the moon, Uranus, and square Saturn, it does not look pretty. But when we look at a T-square, you have to actually take into consideration the planet that is the focal point of the T-square. So I'm having to kind of build on this and go, okay, it's not just about Venus, it's also about Saturn. And Saturn's also squaring the moon, and it's squaring Venus, and it's squaring the sun, right? Squaring Uranus. Thankfully, at the time of this eclipse, Saturn is direct. So Saturn has a lot of power, basically, I guess is what I'm getting at. Saturn is no longer retrograde. Pluto is no longer retrograde. Jupiter is getting ready to station as well and go direct in the month of November. Outer planets are waking up. So we are going to start seeing the results of what's been going on over the last few months while these planets were retrograde. Usually when outer planets like this are retrograde, there are big things brewing, right, globally. And we're going to start to see the effects of that. So it's really highlighting the Saturn-Uranus square, and where there has been tension in the area of both Aquarius and Taurus in your life since the beginning of 2021. We had a square that started, it was like January, February 2021. We had another one in June. Then we had another one that was around Christmas of last year. We got a bit of a reprieve in 2022, but just recently over this last month, Saturn came back into a square with Uranus because Uranus has been retrograde. Both of these planets, have been squaring at 18 degrees, which is really interesting. It's reactivating the south of the south node. Excuse me. It's reactivating the summer north node Uranus Mars conjunction. So if you guys think back to the end of July, beginning of August, those two planets came into conjunction with the north node in 18. And I remember saying to everybody, as planets go to 18 degrees, whether it's Saturn or Uranus is retrograde, or if planets in Scorpio oppose that, it's reactivating some of those points. So it almost has similar energy to an eclipse, and it's going to now start kind of acting up. So I, for one, think that this is a very challenging eclipse. So you're going to hear some people that are going to put a spin on it, and they're going to say, oh, it's going to be positive, it's going to free you, and it's going to be liberating. And I'm like, it's going to feel like the rug got pulled underneath from under us, like something just dropped, something fell out, the bottom falls out of something, it's not stable. Especially considering the fact that the ruler of both the moon and Uranus, right, both being in Taurus, are in Venus, and it's in opposition. So it's something that represents a relationship. Oppositions represent other people and our need to interact with other people, whether it's our relationship with a partner, a relationship with a boss, a relationship with a bank, with an investment, whatever. Like, there are other people we're going to have to deal with. And then when we look at the square to Saturn at 18, it makes me feel like depending on how well you've been working with this square over the last year or two, this is the test, right? This is to see okay, are you really ready to kind of jump and make the change? Are you going to fall more into the Saturn area of your life, where you're going to stay more kind of contained and separate and committed and grounded and serious and in older traditions? Or are you breaking more into the Uranus, Taurus area of your life, where you're having sudden insights and shifts and changes, and you're willing to kind of just emotionally break off from patterns? I think it's going to be about how we respond to this eclipse, right? And some of us might actually do very well with this. It might be that we've been, proactively kind of knowing that it would come the fall of 2022, and we'd have a moment where we had to kind of pick a lane or pick a side, right? So the opposition, the square, obviously Venus square Saturn can be setbacks or challenges, delays. So if you're somebody who is thinking about investing if you're somebody who has a lot of money in accounts where you're investing, I would just say, like, you want to know where everything is, because it may be more challenging to pull money out or put money into things. You get what I'm saying? With some people, it's like, depending on who, you know, you're working with or who you're banking with, if you want to, you know, put money into an account online for investing, you might have to wait a couple days. You may not be able to do that. It might be like the opportunity to jump in and invest in something or buy something like passes by too quickly, because it would be several days before you could move money. But if you're also someone who's like, I don't feel comfortable what's going on, you know, in the market or with this account, or I want to pull money out, there can actually be delays and inability to be able to have withdrawals. As much as I hate saying that, that's kind of what it's looking like. And I've seen this in the past. Like, I saw this around the time that we had the Mars North Node Uranus conjunction. I also saw it when we had the other eclipses that took place earlier this year. And it did manifest as that. We saw that in other parts of the world. We saw that in Canada. We saw that in I think it was Asia, somewhere in China. But, you know, it's not going to affect everybody the same way. It's really going to be about where you're living. And I think part of it is because we do have Saturn that's now awake and direct, and it's like moving towards the third decan. So it's in the second decan. So it's going to be more about select groups of people in certain places. I did a presentation on this last weekend, and I did a webinar talking about how, if you look at the eclipse path for both eclipses, the countries that it is kind of shadowing over are going to be the most affected. And the solar eclipse in Scorpio is primarily like Russia and parts of like Eastern Europe. And then if we look at the lunar eclipse in Taurus, it's like everything, like all of the United States and Canada, all of Russia, all of Eastern Europe, like pretty much Africa and Western Europe for the most part are not really in sight. So that tells me that something that's going on in the United States and Canada, you know, and parts of Russia and parts of the Middle East are going to be majorly affected. So there was definitely a lot more of a sense of, you know, this being a more significant eclipse. I'm curious to see what happens, you know, because I think this is going to take still a little bit of time to kind of pan out, knowing that, you know, Mercury is going to come ahead of the sun the very next day, and then we're going to watch Mercury come into a square with Saturn. So this is something that will take a couple of days to kind of fully kind of pan out. But like I said, I've seen eclipses, you know, like I've seen eclipses literally start happening 2 weeks in advance. Like we're already kind of in that energy. Once we have the solar eclipse in Scorpio, it's like game on, and it really could affect anything. We've got, in terms of aspects beyond that, like I said, Jupiter will retrograde. So at the time of this eclipse, Jupiter's back in Pisces. And it's in the same sign as Neptune. It's only going to drop to about 28 degrees when it retrogrades in total. But this will be the last time that we have Jupiter and Neptune in the sign of Pisces, which they rule in our lifetime. We're not going to see this again. By the time, you know, 12 years from now, Jupiter comes back around, Neptune will already be in Aries. So I guess the positive of this is that it does kind of have this energy of a lot of high spiritual vibes, like prayer, protection, tuning into your intuition, paying attention to dreams, like having a lot of support from like otherworldly realms. So holding space for that is so important, especially as we're seeing during the time of the eclipse that thankfully, you know, Venus is trining Neptune, right? So Venus trine Neptune can be very dreamy, very soft, very sentimental, but it can also be a sense of like sorrow, loss, release, letting go, remembering, because these are in water signs, and Venus is in the sign of Scorpio, which does deal with like death and letting go and rebirth and renewal. So I do feel like, thankfully, after the eclipse, Venus is going to continue to trine these two planets, which is allowing us to kind of put something to rest and to do it with a sense of grace and a sense of ease. But that does not take away from it still feeling like sorrow, like especially when you see planets in Scorpio make trines to Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces. Sometimes it doesn't manifest the way that people would think, like, oh, Venus trine, you know, Jupiter, or Venus trine Neptune. Not when it's in signs that are associated with endings and release and loss, right? The fourth house deals with, you know, the ends of situations, burials. Scorpio does deal with like the actual transformation, the spiritual shift, the body that releases the soul. And then Pisces deals with like that afterlife and the reincarnation and like now going on to like the next realm. So I'm not somebody who is going to subscribe to telling you guys that it's going to be super romantic and soft and whimsical. No, I don't think so. I think an eclipse square Saturn, this is a very different eclipse than the one that we saw in the fall of last year. You know, fall of last year, we had the sun and we had Mercury in Scorpio, and yes, it was in opposition to the moon in Taurus, but it was in a square to Jupiter. So it was almost like thinking very more optimistically about the future, hoping for the best. I mean, it had a larger than life feel because Jupiter was basically saying, okay, all of these changes are coming and it could be great. And now a year later, we have a similar eclipse, and at definitely more difficult degrees, if you ask me. And instead of a square to Jupiter, we see a square to Saturn. And I feel like that's kind of like looking at things being like, wow, a year ago we were like, life is going to be so great. Things are going to get better. Everything's going to get easier. And now we're having this eclipse and we're like, when are things going to get better? What's going to change, you know? And what is it that we have to, you know, acknowledge? What is the elephant in the room that we have to acknowledge? Like, where has there been something that has just been really heavy and difficult to kind of carry over this last 6-month period? This is an eclipse that is wrapping up. I'll show you guys. The eclipse that we had in the spring. So it was this one that was on April 30th, 2022. This was the solar eclipse in Taurus. So now we're having the, you know, the lunar eclipse. So it's kind of completing this. So you want to think back to the end of April of 2022. What was going on then? What seeds were you planting? And look at where Taurus is in your chart, because likely with this eclipse, because it was so strongly connected to Uranus, it was sudden actions, needing to make sudden moves, you know, things happening unexpectedly financially, but also in terms of food and our resources and our values and our security. And it was just like a shakeup, right? At this time, though, we also had quite a few planets that were conjunct Venus, and Venus was exalted, right? So an exalted Venus, conjunct Neptune and Jupiter, it was like basically saying, you know, this is for the better, it's romantic, it's whimsical, it's fun, right? Like it was basically saying to really lean into spirituality or your vision or anything in regards to creation. Okay, now 6 months later, this eclipse is not, it's not as friendly. I hate to say that, but it's really not as friendly. One thing you'll see though is just after the eclipse, the moon the next day is going to start making trines to Pluto. Between that trine and the fact that Venus is then going to start sextiling and then Venus is going to trine, you want to pay attention to obviously the action in the Scorpio area of your life, but you want to see the release that's going to be taking place where Pisces is. And we've got these two planets. I mean, it's not quite a sextile, but by sign they're sextiling. And I've always been really intrigued by the relationship between Pisces and Taurus. I feel like Pisces is kind of like the person in the back room who's creating the blueprints or, you know, translating the messages or, you know, putting everything up on a screen and talking about some kind of design feature, and then they pass it off to Taurus and then they say, okay, go build it, you know? So I think that we're actually still reaping the benefits at the time of this full moon of whatever you've been dreaming about, whatever you've been planning, whatever you've been visioning, if you've got a vision board, if you've got like a collage of something, if you've been working on film or art or music, there can be something that can start to kind of come into full bloom during this particular eclipse. Now, Mars is now retrograde at the time of this eclipse as well, and Mars is the counterpart to Venus. And something you will see throughout the next couple days after the eclipse is that Venus will go further into Scorpio, and it is going to start in conjuncting Mars. So they're going to create a funky angle to each other, and Mars is retrograde, which is kind of important during Scorpio season. We do want to look at both Mars and Pluto. Pluto's now direct and it's awake and it's hanging out at 26 degrees and it's going to be there pretty strongly for a period of time. But to watch this yod that's getting ready to show up, where Venus is going to sextile Pluto, it's already kind of there, right? If you really want to split hairs, it's 6 degrees, but it's already kind of there. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. And that's something I didn't even really notice until just now. Okay, so we want to keep Sun, Venus, and Mars. This makes it easier for you guys to see what I'm talking about. Oops, I need Pluto. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. Yod, somebody corrected me. Thank you. Yod. Okay, so you've got a sextile between these two planets, and that's going to be building really up until, you know, these planets hit about 26, 27 degrees. Venus is going to hit it first, so we'll see it for a period of time. So Scorpio sextiles Capricorn, right? They're working together. Scorpio says, hey, this is changing, this is ending, this is scary, I don't want to deal with this, or this is when we have to kind of wrap up and end. And as that sextiles Pluto, Pluto's like, you got it, boss, I'm on it. So they're working together, right? Water and earth are working together to be able to build new structures or break something down. These two create an inconjunct to Mars. So this is actually a really cool angle. It's kind of suggesting that Mars retrograde serves as kind of like the focal point for reworking, rethinking, renegotiating something in the Gemini area of our life. So even though this eclipse really genuinely does belong to Taurus, and it is really highlighted by Venus in Scorpio, shortly after the eclipse, you're going to see that wherever Mars is retrograding in your life, it's actually bringing up a very significant thing that needs to change, and it needs to transform or be reworked, or you need to redirect your energy in some way to better support Scorpio and Capricorn. And this will be, if we look at it like this, looks like Venus is coming into that yod right around November 11th. And then the Sun is going to start to do that, and that's going to be right around the 15th, 16th. So mid-month, basically, right after the time of the eclipse, if that makes sense. Let me put these back up here now so you guys can see. But, you know, they say that's a finger of fate, a finger of God, that is something that's intervening, that is going to cause a significant shift in some sense in relation to your future. So Scorpio season in general, and I'll talk about this in my November monthlies, like we really do want to be paying attention what's going on with both Mars as well as Pluto. So for them to kind of have a little bit of a showdown, it seems like we're going to be shifting directions in the Gemini area of our life to be able to kind of better cope, I think, with this change that's coming. Now there's more eclipses in the spring. We're actually going to see that there's, I believe, another Scorpio eclipse, and we're going to have an Aries eclipse. So we're not having anything until, April 19th, we'll have a solar eclipse in Aries, and then May 5th, we're going to have a eclipse in Scorpio. So for the time being, this is it. This is the last eclipse that we're going to have for this season. Know that these eclipses will sometimes unfold for months, right? Especially if you look at this eclipse, this one's been going on since, spring of this year, but it'll actually continue to get reactivated in the future. As Uranus is finished with its retrograde, it'll come back into this degree next year, and it'll trigger it again. And we're also going to see in 2024, when Jupiter comes into this sign, it'll also trigger it then as well. Not a lot of people realize that it's not like we just have an eclipse and then it's over. I have seen eclipses play out sometimes for years, depending on what particular eclipse we're looking at. Not much other than that, guys. I mean, that seems to be the only thing that is really significant. I mean, I'm noticing some other angles that planets in Scorpio are making to Chiron, both ruled by Mars. So there can be lots of intensity, lots of passion. people that are having a difficult time, like looking at the shadow. I mean, that's what Scorpio does. It holds up a mirror and it's like, okay, look at it, even if it's scary or if it's ugly or if it's something that we don't want to acknowledge. And I think that we're going to see that leading up to the eclipse is like Venus and the Sun and Mercury. They all, you know, quincunx Chiron, and they kind of put us in the hot seat in our own life of where there is a need to really look at our relationship with Scorpio related things. Are we spending too much money and putting it on credit cards? Are we just living a lifestyle that we can't afford? Are we having sex but not practicing intimacy? Are we doing things, you know, behind closed doors that really aren't healthy for us? Because Scorpio is toxic. So even though that this is a Taurus moon, we have to ask ourselves all these questions about the Scorpio area of our life, because Venus is very strongly tied to this eclipse. And just days prior, before this eclipse happens, let me show you, a lot of planets are going to hit the south node. So we're going to see basically from November 2nd, through the 7th, Venus, Sun, Mercury. So love and relationships, resources, finances, values, our own personal energy levels, anything in regards to happiness and a sense of direction, the Sun, our minds and how we communicate and how we think, they all go through the south node. So there's going to be a period where we can easily very well fall back into temptation. We can fall back into bad habits. We can fall back into old patterns. South Node Scorpio is going to drudge up all of these emotions and all of these feelings from the past, but also past lives on a soul level, where we've been hurt or abandoned or, you know, mistreated or abused, where we've experienced something that was so painful and so traumatic that we're having a really difficult time being present and being in our bodies, North Node in Taurus. So that's what's so interesting here is like, I just keep reminding myself, you know, when this eclipse comes to like be in my body and not respond to fear or stress or anything how I have in the past, because Scorpio energy can be quite intense and it can either close up and shut down, or it can get really angry, or it can just like want to burn the house down. So I'm anticipating that this is going to be an eclipse for me. This eclipse is happening exactly in opposition to my Sun and my Pluto and my Mercury, that I'm like, okay, whatever happens, happens. You just have to roll with it, knowing that it's about having that detox and that cleanse and like that purge. So, you know, we have eclipses, like relationships can end, but new ones can begin. Jobs can end, but we can find something that's much better suited for us. Oftentimes when we have difficult eclipses, when you're in it, it's kind of hard to see the forest through the trees. But when you get to the other side, 6 months down the road, you might look at it and go, well, thank God that ended. You know, it was painful and it was really difficult and I was kind of in a spot, but I really needed to handle that. Wherever Scorpio is in your chart, it's going to be highlighting like where that has to go, because it's not supporting the North Node in Taurus. And this might be, you know, fear, envy, jealousy, greed, materialism, secrets, you know, dishonest and dysfunctional relationships and relationships to others. This can be our relationship also, I think, with how we view death and loss and grief, how we look at what is toxic in our life, you know. Thankfully, I mean, that this is eclipse that's close to Venus. It's basically saying, where the Sun is close to Venus, you know, this hurts, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's finally kind of, you know, tend to the wound. And sometimes I think with Scorpio energy, you know, the poison or the venom can also be the remedy. So there's going to be some stuff coming up that we're not really going to want to deal with, but we need to deal with, because whatever that situation that transpires as a result of the eclipse, it's going to help us really kind of, you know, become aware of where the problem is and finally tend to it. But look for some dramatic shifts and changes that are going to be happening. I mean, I for one feel like you guys are going to be feeling this a lot earlier, so you may not have to wait till the 8th. I would look and see what's going on here around November 1st, when we have all of these planets approaching the South Node and the Moon conjuncts Saturn, and then we're actually coming into the buildup of the full moon. So this is basically like the last quarter square, the second quarter square. So it's the opening square from the new moon. So this will be the second one when it comes into the full moon. Now, is there anything else that I'm missing here? It's going to be midterm elections here in the United States. I don't want to speculate too much, but I will say that I'm a little curious about an eclipse during midterms. I'm a little curious also with Venus and the moon in opposition, so that there is going to likely be some stuff getting stirred up right around the times of this election that is really putting the collective on edge, Moon Uranus. I'm also really anticipating some significant something that may take some time to come out about voting fraud. I mean, we see fraudulent things or stuff like that when there are aspects to Neptune. And so we're going to see that Mercury is close to the sun. It's going to trine Neptune, and then Mercury will pull ahead of the sun and it'll cazimi. And it still needs to, you know, come into opposition with Uranus. Maybe there's going to be like malfunctions, electrical malfunctions with machines. Maybe there's going to be delays and us not knowing exact counts for a period of time. Obviously, when, you know, the moon is stressed and it's a lunar eclipse, we're going to see that just collectively there's going to be people who are just going to be a little on edge and dissatisfied. So I feel like there is no real clear ideal turnout or situation for both political parties. I'll just leave it at that you're going to see that people are going to be displeased regardless because of the square to Saturn. But I think that there may be a delay. There may be some issues with immediately getting some of those numbers because Mercury does deal with machines. I also want you guys to be aware that because Uranus is what is sudden and explosive, and Scorpio planets do talk about, you know, war or crime. I think we're going to hear more about this in the news, whether this is, you know, stuff that is more fear related in terms of getting the masses afraid of going out and being out in public, or some significant public events that happen around the time of the eclipse, or just hearing more about stuff relating to war and explosives and things like that. I mean, you're gonna hear that stuff. That's just gonna keep coming up. Okay. So let's touch on where this is happening for each and every one of the 12 signs. I want to take you guys through this really quick. So this is for whole sign Western predictions. You want to listen for your ascendant sign as well as your sun and your moon sign. Your ascendant is going to tell you what area of life this eclipse is taking place in. And the sun sign is going to be more about how it affects you personally, your happiness, your career, and your moon is more relating to your emotions. Also, because this is an eclipse taking place at 16 degrees of Taurus, if you have any placements from 14 to 18 degrees of Taurus, that's a sun, moon, rising, or personal planet, or any of the fixed signs, you are going to be affected by this the most. If you have 14 to 18 degrees of Capricorn or Virgo, you're going to experience a trine, so it's going to be harmonious and easier for you. It's going to be helpful for you. And if you have anything from 14 to 18 degrees of either Pisces or Cancer, you're going to be experiencing a sextile, so that will be helpful for you. The fire and the air signs, it's not going to be making specific aspects unless you have planets there. But if it is also your birthday, like let's say the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, that's an important time to pay attention because you're having an eclipse on your birthday. So it's definitely worth taking a look at your solar return and getting a reading, okay? All right, so for Aries and Aries rising, so you have this lunar eclipse in Taurus, and this is taking place in your second house right here. Second house deals with your spending power, your money, your resources, your values, valuable things that you possess, okay? And this deals specifically with your house and your home, and anything in regards also to your partner. So here's why. So the moon is what rules your fourth house, Uranus, which rules your goals and groups, and the moon is in opposition to Mercury and the sun and Venus. So this could be buying land, paying off a mortgage, talking about purchasing a home, getting an offer on a home, talking about moving, something in regards to home and family values, resources, and your partner's money, okay? So this eclipse can bring something in where you're like, okay, we're making an offer, or somebody, you know, gave us some money to buy something, or we got a loan or something like that. The fact that it's in opposition to Venus in the 7th, you know, it's quite positive for you, Aries, because you are likely to be either making a big purchase or bringing something in. The only hang up that I see is the square to Saturn. So it might kind of represent the need to like negotiate or like work with a group or work with other people, right? So Saturn does talk about your goals and anything in regards to being in charge or being able to handle something or take care of something. This can also be a time where you find out that there is something going on financially within your family, and that the family is going through a bit of like a tough spot, and like maybe you have to get involved in that in some way, all right? But this will make sense. Like, you had an eclipse here that was in the fall of last year. You also have had eclipses that have been taking place in your 8th and also your 2nd house in the spring. Both times should have been times that felt a little financially stressful. So if you think about what was going on then, there could have been just more expenses than usual, or you having to kind of pay for things that you didn't anticipate you were going to be paying for, okay? All roads lead, though, to you becoming more self-sufficient when it comes to your resources, especially knowing in the next year, Jupiter's getting ready to go into your 2nd house. It's going to bring you more wealth. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that you're managing your budget and that you're staying on top of your finances, okay? Good luck, Aries. Taurus and Taurus rising. Well, this is your moon, honey. Let's see what happens. You know, a full moon in your sign is a completion of something that you've been working really hard on. I think that it is stressful, especially when it comes to your relationship with other people. You know, Taurus, you have been going through eclipses in your sign really since the beginning of this last year. And it's really highlighting where you need to focus more on yourself, where you need to focus more on your body, your appearance, having freedom. I mean, you know, these eclipses have been strongly highlighting Uranus in your sign. Uranus deals with your career and anything in regards to your responsibility and how you identify out in the world. So I think an eclipse here is in some ways kind of a big announcement or something that you're telling the world. With the moon on your ascendant, and the moon rules your 3rd house, it looks like you're getting ready to tell people something on social media. It could be that you're moving. It could be that you're pregnant. It could be that you're going through a separation. I don't like saying that, but something like that could be happening. You know, if it's like, hey, I quit my job and I'm Jerry Maguiring my way out of here and I'm starting my own company. I could see that, right, with the square to Saturn. I think that you need to watch for like telling people to just to stick it, because I could see a little bit of that with this eclipse, because you are going to be more sensitive and more emotional with the moon in your sign. And there is this feeling of just needing to emotionally kind of just like break free. And it will oppose Mercury, Sun, and Venus in your 7th house. So there's some stress going on with relationships, and the eclipse is in your sign. So it's going to affect you, and then it's going to affect how you treat other people, especially if you are in a committed relationship or a marriage or a business partnership, and it will square Saturn. So I could definitely see in some situations for Tauruses that are in a really close business partnership, or if you work with a spouse, that there could be some drama or something that's going on that's just like, you know, I can't do this anymore, or this isn't working, or I'm not having enough freedom to do my own thing, and like it could get a little wild here between you and another person, or stress in regards to you know, you or a spouse returning to work, because Saturn is the square, so there seems to be some challenge. Saturn does rule both your 9th and your 10th house, and the fact that it's in the 10th makes me feel like it's more about career, but it could also get kind of nasty here, where there could be some legal issues or filings or separations, unfortunately, with this eclipse. So some Taurus risings, and especially if you are in a relationship, you know, with a Scorpio, it can get really kind of dicey here. So just be careful, especially if your partner has a sun, moon, or rising in Scorpio. It can get really, really quite fierce. But you're completing a chapter in regards to yourself and your own personal independence. And there is a lot of having to tell other people, like, back off, give me some space, or like, you're not the boss of me. Good luck, Taurus. For Gemini and Gemini rising, you have got a lunar eclipse happening in the sign of Taurus, and it's happening in your 12th house. Wow. Pay attention to your dreams. Intuition's going to run high. There is a sense of some things that might happen that you don't see coming. They are likely to be financial because it involves the moon, and Taurus does deal with money in general. It's in opposition to all of these planets in Scorpio in your 6th with the South Node. So you're learning to let go of bad habits. You're learning to become more aware of your daily routine. You're combating scheduling issues, health issues, diet issues, and you're trying to do it in a way where you're paying attention to your emotions and your body in the 12th and the 6th house. And this applies to both Gemini and Sag. You can get lost in these houses. There can be all kinds of like getting sick, having addictions come up, having, psychological stuff come up. And I think the eclipse in the 12th house is more about how you're responding to the collective. So like if the world around you feels like it's kind of crazy and hectic and on fire, it's how you respond to that, right? I say pay attention to your dreams because it does deal with guidance, because Uranus in the 12th house can be like seeing things or picking up energy and like kind of foreseeing the future. And it's going to be you having like a really strong hunch or a feeling possibly about money or investments or anything in regards to resources. But a full moon here can also bring up the need to rest, recuperate, like sometimes people do end up getting hospitalized during these eclipses. Sometimes it's about a breakthrough that you have in therapy, or that you go and you see a healer and you're working with a healer and you do, a hypnotism session because you're wanting to kind of like let go of a bad habit, right? Especially if it's like relating to diet or sex or addiction, all right? With the squares to Saturn, I think it's important to also keep in mind that like travel, foreign travel, it doesn't look good. Looks like there's going to be some hangups and some delays. There can be some issues in regards to like an old philosophy or a belief system that's breaking down. And there can be delays and challenges either with publishing, travel, or education, right? Good luck, Gemini. For Cancer and Cancer rising, you've got a full moon lunar eclipse happening in Taurus in your 11th house. This is important because anything involving the moon really affects you. And Taurus does sextile your ascendant in Cancer, so it is kind of supporting your physical body and anything in regards to, how you show yourself to the world. It's in alignment with your emotional nature, let's put it that way. So the full moon is in your 11th house of friends and associations and networks, and it's very closely tied to Uranus. So you might be feeling like you're going through a change in regards to a friendship. You're going through a change in regards to your goals. You're meeting new people. I think Moon Uranus, you want to watch. There can be a little bit of strife going on with a friendship or somebody who's close to you, especially because the moon is there. And this moon is going to square Saturn, relationships with others, and it's going to oppose the Sun, Mercury, and Venus in the 5th. Now, for the most part, I think that planets going through your 5th house right now is bringing up a lot of opportunity for creative projects. If you're self-employed, it can be a great time. It can be a time for dating, falling in love, participating in hobbies, having a good time, like partying, right? This is the love that you give. This is the love you receive. So I think an eclipse here can in some ways bring in people who can help you get out of an emotional funk and people who help lift you up, but it can also bring up some challenges with friends, and it can make you like question whether or not you're lovable or you're worthy. You want to watch for that. Borrowing and lending also come up here, especially among friends. I would say be careful because Saturn in the 8th is kind of like, what's the catch? Is it like somebody who's lending to you, but does it affect the friendship or the relationship? Is it a wealthy friend who, you have like an intimate relationship with, and like there's an exchange and like they kind of cover things? I'd be really careful in entangling like either sex or money with friendships, because it seems like it can get kind of complicated. If you look at what's been happening over the last 2 years with the Saturn-Uranus squares, a lot of you guys have realized like you can't make investments that you can't afford, or you don't want to have just loose, open relationships with people that are undefined, or there's been lots of changes going on in regards to your friendships, and you've realized how much of an effect certain people have on you psychologically. Look for good news coming from friends, though. An eclipse here can bring an amazing party, a gathering, a get-together. just keep in mind, like I said, you know, not everybody is kind of meant to be a part of your social group right now. So you want to be careful for people who may have like a more negative impact on your demeanor. Okay, good luck. Leo and Leo rising. You've got a full moon, lunar eclipse taking place in your 10th house of career. This is going to light your chart up like a Christmas tree. So you have been forewarned. You already know this though, because you had an eclipse also that was in Scorpio just a few weeks prior to this full moon. But if you have a Leo or other Leo placements, Leo rising, because it creates a grand fixed cross, it's probably going to be quite complex for you, especially if you are within like the second decan. So if you've got planets within, you know, like that 15 to 20 degrees of Leo, it's going to be intense. You're going to feel a square. You've been working really hard with your career, Leo, okay? And I think that to some extent, that is the most important thing right now with the North Node and the eclipse taking place in your 10th house. To me, it looks like there can be a grand reveal, or you're getting ready to launch something, or you're getting ready to share something with the world. Maybe you're getting ready to let everybody know that you've started a new job, or that you've started your own, you know, thing. That you're launching something, that you're, you know, changing your identity pretty radically out in the world when it comes to your career. Now, the moon is very close to Uranus, which rules your 7th house. So as your professional identity is changing, so is your romantic life. And there may be a sense of being like, new job, new partner, or, you know, like quitting job, going through a divorce, like something is really brewing here. It's hard because there's so many planets in your 4th house, which is representing your home and your family, where you're like, I have to let go of the past. I have to let go of certain relatives. I have to be willing to move out of my hometown. I have to be willing to open up my home and make changes in my home so I can better receive new potential in relationships, so I can better kind of climb the ladder when it comes to my career success. Unfortunately, you know, the road to success sometimes is paved with a lot of turbulence and a lot of having to cut certain people off or making sacrifices in your personal life. And I know that that may not be what you want to hear, but I feel like in the end, both your career and your relationships are really going to continue to reach for, you know, better dynamics. Don't let certain friendships or certain relationships stand in the way right now. And if you have to break things off with a partner because they're not on the same page as you, if you have to break things off with a business partner because you're like, they're not pulling their weight, I could see that. And I think it would be even more complex if it's somebody that you live with or you work with, as much as I hate to say that. This can be some pretty definitive stuff in regards to your career and your relationships as a result of these eclipses. And you know, you don't need me to tell you, you've been living this for the last 2 years. So the question is what's going to give, right? And it can't be your career. So it's got to either be your home and your family or the past, or it's got to be your relationships. And if you're committed to relationships, then you need to be super committed to making changes in your home so you can better kind of facilitate relationship growth, okay? Good luck, Leo. For Virgo and Virgo rising, you have got a lunar eclipse in Taurus. It's in your 9th house. It's in a sister sign, so it's going to trine placements in Virgo, especially if you have any placements between like 14 and 16 degrees, even up to 18 maybe. So this trine you can see physical change and transformation. So you may travel, start a new program, start some new kind of training. There's a new belief system that emerges for you in your life. So that's really positive. But a full moon in the 9th house are things like completing a lawsuit, going on a trip, getting accepted into a college, finishing a degree program, committing to a new belief system, like things like that. And it definitely involves groups, okay, because the moon is involved. And it's very close to Uranus, so to me it seems like you're making more time for travel or education or philosophy. You know, the 9th house is the bigger picture of life, so it's like what we're hoping to achieve and how everything kind of comes together naturally. It's all in opposition to all this Scorpio in your chart. South node, so you're letting go of something, right? So you're letting go of an old way of communicating, you're letting go of needing to think a certain way. you're letting go maybe of a car, a vehicle. Maybe there's like a lot of back and forth that you're having travel-wise, or with a sibling or somebody in your neighborhood, something like that. My concern is the square to Saturn, and where if this is a situation where there was like a contractual issue, or there's a problem with like a neighbor or a lease or an accident with a car, like the squares to Saturn are like delays, setbacks, challenges. So you want to be really careful when it comes to any of these third house topics. You know, the ruler here of Scorpio is Mars, and I'm looking at Mars in your 10th going retrograde, and I'm wondering if there's like a discrepancy going on with documents relating to like a lease, or documents relating to a job. Like, you know, basically like your job description is not, it's not matching up with what you're doing, and you're having to go back to something that you agreed to, and you're like, I don't know if this is working for me, or this schedule is killing me, or, you know, I'm not feeling very well with Saturn in my 6th house. It's harder for me to get around, or it's harder for me to breathe in some situations. These eclipses are affecting your 3rd house, which can be the lungs. So health stuff can come up with the square, and I want you to be super mindful of what's going on in your local neighborhood, or if there are problems with a gadget, a laptop, a computer, or anything in regards to your car, that should be taken seriously and it needs to be dealt with. And be very careful, because there can be legal stuff that can come up here, or there can be lawsuits. Now, on the flip side, it can be just making time for a better routine, making time for more health related things, going to the gym, you know, prepping food, that kind of stuff. And it's giving you the opportunity to complete something. So think back to what intentions you were setting back in the spring of this year. Look at the other eclipses that were taking place also in the fall of last year. I think it's just been prompting you guys to travel a little bit more, honestly, and start thinking about what you're learning, or what you could be teaching, writing, or publishing. Good luck, Virgo. For Libra and Libra rising, you have got a south node. Hello. We haven't even had the solar eclipse yet, so I keep thinking about the solar eclipse. We have a north node, Taurus lunar eclipse. It's a full moon that's taking place in your 8th house. Okay, so Libra. This is significant for you and for Taurus, because it is strongly showing a Venus transit. So both of the eclipses are going to affect you. Similar to Aries, this is very financial eclipses that you're having here. Now, this one's a bit sweet and salty. The full moon in your 8th house is going to bring some kind of ending, some kind of completion, some kind of shock, likely. And because it involves the moon, it's in regards to either your career, or it's in regards to like maybe family or a parent. The moon is conjunct Uranus. Uranus rules the 5th house, so this can play out a couple different ways. There can be like this sudden realization, and you have like a breakthrough psychologically about something in relation to your childhood, and like being more so open and being capable of being loving and more trusting. There can also be a sudden shift and an unexpected change that happens with a partner's finances or resources. And it squares Saturn, so it tells me that it's challenging how you feel about 5th house topics. So it's challenging the way that you feel about creativity, happiness, joy, dating, love, children. For some Libra and Libra risings, I think that this is probably going to manifest as increased money coming in, you know, support that comes in from other people. It could be that your, you know, partner or your romantic partner, your business partner suddenly, you know, makes a lot of money out of the blue, and then it's like, wow, this is amazing. It could also be that there is an unexpected transition within your family, and there is a death that happens, or an inheritance that happens, and then suddenly you realize that you're bringing something in. All these planets in your 2nd house, Mercury, Sun, and Venus, are actually really strong in terms of spending power, gaining, bringing things in. But it's conjunct the South Node, so many Libra risings especially will benefit from being like, do I need these things? Do I need this stuff? Is it important to me? And these eclipses have this weird way of like basically saying like, let stuff go, because there's new things coming into your life. So if you're decluttering, you might get more stuff out of your house than usual. You might give things away. You might find that this is beneficial because you're making room to bring new things in. The other way that I could look at this is that there is some unexpected fallout that happens financially because of a risky investment. So you want to be very careful. Don't be investing or doing anything that you're not willing to potentially lose, because this eclipse can suggest that because you've taken a risky investment. It could be big risk, big reward. But I think that with planets conjunct the South Node in your second, I would not take any risks right now. And last but not least, I think with all the planets in the second square Saturn and Saturn square the North Node Uranus, to me, this looks like it could be the stress of expenses relating to children or a child or an unexpected pregnancy. A lot of you guys have had Saturn square Uranus here for like the last, 2 years. So you've seen this back and forth that's been going on either in your love life or with children and resources, and the stress of whether or not you can actually have children or take care of kids because of a partner having instability in their resources. So be careful, Libra. This can be an unexpected pregnancy for some. Okay, good luck. Scorpio rising. You have got a North Node lunar eclipse in Taurus. Okay, this will be happening around the 8th of November. It's in your 7th house. It's in the opposite sign. You are still probably going to be reeling from the solar eclipse that you had in your sign at the end of October. Where the last eclipse was more about you, this one's more about other people. And if you look back on the last 2 eclipses that you had in Taurus in the fall of 2021 and also the spring that we had this year, there were things going on with others, right? So eclipses in the 7th house conjunct Uranus brings up like this sudden shift and change and transformation. So it could have been that relationships have suddenly, kind of broken down, and then, new ones came in. It could have been that things have been rocky with somebody that you've been in a relationship with. It can be that you've just been focusing on clearing the past and you're like, I'm not in a relationship. I'm just trying to figure out how to find stability. The challenge has been the fact that for the last 2 years, you've had Saturn in your 4th house of home. So there has been more feeling landlocked in your home. There's been more feeling heaviness in regards to family or property or responsibility, and also heavier moods. And it is not easy to have Saturn go through your 4th house in a square with your ascendant, let alone with Uranus in your 7th. So while you've been dealing with all of this heaviness in regards to your home and your responsibility, Saturn and Uranus have been duking it out in a square, basically bringing up this theme that partnerships and relationships can come very, very quickly. If you are committed, partners get antsy and they're like, I want to move, or I want to go somewhere else, or, I want out of the house. And they're trying to liberate you, Scorpio. They're trying to get you out of like a funk if you've been in a funk. This can also represent a turning point in relationships because it's a full moon in your 7th where there's big decisions that are being made about the future of the relationship. Sometimes it's like, okay, in order for us to be in a relationship, somebody's got to move, square to Saturn. For some of you guys, it's, that we've been married for 20 years and I'm not happy, so I'm like leaving. It really depends. But I think that this is a not so friendly eclipse for Scorpio rising. So you kind of need to be prepared. Those of you guys who are in close relationships, or if you live with family, this can also be about family being around the house. So if you, whether you're in a relationship or not, if you're visiting family or family is visiting you, you need to kind of prepare for some drama. There could definitely be some drama. On the flip side, I feel like with Venus and the Sun and Mercury on your ascendant, it makes me feel like if a partner is stressed and they're going through something and something's happening and they're like having a meltdown, you're like kind of like there to assist them, right? And the same thing goes with that solar eclipse that you had. The solar eclipse in your sign, you also had Venus on your ascendant. So it was about partners being more appreciative of you. Now it's going to be you going, okay, I've got you if you need me, right? And the 7th house can be clients. The 7th house can be friends. It can be family. It can be somebody you're partnering with in general. The challenge, though, is that square to Saturn, and Saturn is going to keep saying, like, okay, if you really need to move for us to be together, or if you really do need some time, on your own, just realize that you're going to be dealing with some really difficult situations with other people, and likely they're going to be very sensitive and very emotional. It involves the moon. So in this case, it can be something in regards to your in-laws, something in regards to legal situations, travel, distance moves, or anything like that. So good luck, Scorpio. Hang in there. It's gonna be a little rocky, but you should have an idea of what it is, because you've been dealing with the Saturn-Uranus square for 2 years. For some of you guys, it may be finally having a breakthrough and buying a house, moving, selling a house, but it's going to be hard to kind of keep everybody happy. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, I have a full moon lunar eclipse taking place in your 6th house of Taurus. This is highlighting the axis of the 6th and the 12th house. The 6th house, your routines, your health, your pets, your workspace, your office, your diet, you know, the gym, anything in regards to cleaning up, making better, perfecting, right? And Taurus is about, I think, what you're eating. It's also about your financial habits. It can also be about your flexibility in your schedule. A lot of you guys have seen a lot of wildness in your schedule with these eclipses in your 6th house, and like also sudden issues either with health or with pets. Now, the planets in Scorpio in your 12th house are highlighting like the shadow self, what you need to let go of, what needs to be free. You had a solar eclipse here first. Now you have a lunar eclipse here that's going to cap it off. And to me, it's like all the physical changes that come in your health and your routine and your day-to-day life as a result of some of the awarenesses that you have become aware of in terms of bad habits, or where, you know, you give love away and it's not reciprocated, or where there are some difficult things going on in relationships behind closed doors. This is an interesting one. I mean, I think that you're going to realize that a lot of your habits and your patterns are as a result of things you have not dealt with emotionally or psychologically. And these eclipses are really highlighting the need to kind of be more in your body and be working through this, whether it's acupuncture, working with herbs, connecting with the earth, anything in regards to having more support and having like new healthcare practitioners. Now this all squares Saturn, and so the difficulty here is the mind, and like getting your mind on board with making some of these changes and having healthier habits and the way that you communicate and the way that you talk to yourself. It's also about cars, vehicles, you know, contracts, short distance travel, siblings. There can be some stuff going on with any one of these topics. And I think that for the most part, it's teaching you like how to communicate when something isn't working, or how to, you know, work through self-esteem issues, and whether that's through journaling or talking to somebody, or just learning how to like not overly extend yourself for others to the point where it's affecting your mental health or your physical health. That seems to really be what's coming up here. Also, just keep in mind that you do have Mars retrograde now in your 7th house. And so I think that this is really highlighting like where other people can help you as long as you're communicating and you're speaking out. Okay. Good luck, Sag. Capricorn and Cap rising. We've got a lunar eclipse full moon taking place in Taurus, and it's in your 5th house. This is a sister sign, so it will somehow positively aspect your ascendant or your sun or your moon. This is a pretty decent eclipse, Capricorn, because you've got it in your 5th house, and the 5th house moon and you know, the lunar eclipse there, embracing having more fun, having more romance, being able to bring in new hobbies, finding something that you love, falling in love, going on dates, having playtime. This can also be about children, pregnancy, starting your own business. Uranus is there, so it's about finding ways to invest more in having fun and being creative. But sometimes a solar eclipse or a full moon in the 5th house can be like, I love you, or I'm pregnant, or, you know, I met somebody very significant. It's about the act of just really being able to be yourself and enjoying yourself. And so the fact that you're having that in the 5th house and that it's trining your ascendant is really wonderful. You're getting a lot of support from Scorpio energy in your 11th, where your friends are on board and your goals are really kind of coming together. The challenge here is the fact that this eclipse squares your chart ruler, Saturn. So it's like wanting to have fun and sticking to a budget, wanting to have a good time, you know, and like knowing when to say enough is enough and not overdoing it. Super social with all these planets in your 11th house right now. And I feel like maybe it's just you're socializing, or there's a lot going on with friends, and you're really focusing on like sticking to a budget, not spending too much money. I also think the South Node eclipse is going through your 11th house is a lot of like not caring as much about what people think or your friends think, and like not putting too much effort in like what they have to say, focusing more on what makes you happy and what is best for you. And this may bring up some issues in regards to security and self-esteem if you're like, well, who am I without my friends or my social group? But what you have to gain here with Uranus in the North Node in the 5th is more fun, more pleasure, I think more creativity, and the ability to kind of live a more fulfilled life, even if it's on your own, even if it's not spending a lot of money, even if it's not including all of your, you know, best buddies. It's something that's emerging that's just particularly for you, and it's meant for you to enjoy. Okay? Good luck, Capricorn. Aquarius and Aquarius rising. Okay, we have got a lunar eclipse full moon in Taurus taking place in your 4th house. 4th house, home, family, roots, property, right? Your private life. Oh boy. Having an eclipse here, I mean, you've had a couple, but having an eclipse here is going to represent that T-square directly to Saturn in your sign. And that's really significant for you because I do feel like this is about what you allow to happen, your boundaries, what your goals are, what your kind of vision is, and whether or not there are things that are happening that make you feel like you're on your own, or you're doubting your faith, or you feel like crazy because Saturn rules your 12th house. So there will be moments in this eclipse cycle where you're like, am I the only sane person in the room? Like, what's going on? Or why is this falling on me? Or why is it more difficult? Why am I the person who has to be the adult in the room? Physical issues too you want to watch out for, because there can be some problems going on with the body, and it can really have an impact on what you're able to do at home for family and also out in the world work-wise. Full moons here and an eclipse here can definitely bring up some shocking things with relatives. It can also bring some changes dramatically to your home zone. It does involve the moon, so it makes me feel like this is about the health of a relative, the organization of the home, anything in regards to being of service to the home or the family. You've got a loaded 10th house, so it's like very career oriented right now, and there's like a lot of you needing to be out in the world, but as planets conjunct the South Node, you realize like, I can't be totally consumed by that right now. I have to be super focused on what's going on with my, you know, my emotions, my family, my parents, my kids, my home. And it's going to feel like some pressure, but I feel like with that Saturn square, it's about you realizing that this is a moment where sometimes you have to go at it alone, and these eclipses are kind of serving as lessons for becoming more independent or becoming more assertive. As the North Node goes through your 4th house, you're creating like a new home or family dynamic. So some of you guys might be in like communal living. Some of you guys are like wanting to like live on the road. Some of you guys are wanting to just kind of go city to city. Some of you guys are finally breaking free and you're leaving your hometown. It really depends. But I think this eclipse is going to kind of show you where you've been really trying to figure out how to create a home base for some time. And finally, this is kind of breaking free, and it may go hand in hand with making some changes or some sacrifices in regards to your career or your public image so you can do more 4th house stuff. For some, this will be, you know, like switching jobs, quitting jobs. It may be that you step back and you work part-time. Some of you guys might retire so you can focus more on the 4th house and feel like you can be with your family and enjoy your own personal home zone. And you have a plan for that over the next year. And it gets particularly sweet next year when Jupiter goes into your 4th house and you start to really reap all of the benefits of the hard work that you've been putting into whatever it is that you're trying to create. Okay? Good luck. We've got Pisces and Pisces rising, a full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus in your 3rd house. 3rd house, communication, short distance trips, siblings, your neighborhood, contracts, cars, vehicles. Being that the moon is here, okay, this is about communicating in a more sensitive, emotional way, being more nurturing. You might be interacting more with extended family members, going on short distance trips. Maybe you're writing more. Maybe you're learning something. Maybe you're learning a new language, or maybe you're educating yourself about money, resources, finances. Like I said, we've had eclipses here a couple times now, so you're kind of already getting into the swing of it. I like that it sextiles your ascendant. I also like that you have all this Scorpio trining your ascendant. This is about you learning new skills or new tasks. And I think because it's ruled by Venus. Venus is in the 9th, and we're seeing some squares. It's something that you're doing behind the scenes, like you're working really hard behind the scenes, getting ready to reveal something. Jupiter's back in your sign. It's conjunct Neptune, so it's all about your vision and your vision for the future and what you believe in, and also where you're going in regards to your career. A wonderful time during this eclipse to start thinking about, like, okay, is it time to, like, you know, put out all the social media launches? Is it time to get ready to teach the course? Is it time to buy the car? Like, you know, there's going to be third house completions that are going on. And I feel like it definitely deals with either documents or traveling or education. It's one of these three things, because you've got the third house lord in the 9th. Maybe you're planning a big trip. Maybe you're going on a big trip. Maybe you're going to be sharing some really significant news on your social media. Maybe you're teaching something. The only hang up here is that you do have some squares to Saturn. So it tells me that, you know, like, making sure that you're getting visibility that you need. Maybe you're having a difficult time communicating with a certain friend and you're kind of feeling like you're in the dark, and it's difficult for you to kind of get the point across to some people. I would be mindful with vehicles, contracts, and driving during this eclipse, because to me it does seem like there are some things that are out of visibility, some things that you could overlook or that you didn't quite see. But I think the planets from Scorpio to Pisces and Taurus to Pisces, I think working with those trines and those sextiles are really going to open everything up for you. It's all about faith. It's all about belief. It's about your vision. And maybe it's just a matter of getting all of those ideas down on paper, so that way you can start to kind of share that with the world. Okay? Good luck, Pisces, and everybody else who's going to be experiencing this lunar eclipse in Taurus. I hope it's a good one for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, let me know, where is this eclipse taking place in your chart? Look at where Taurus is in your chart. You're completing what has been in some ways 2 years of a Saturn-Uranus storyline, where something is getting ready to open up and totally just break out. And I'm sending you guys all good eclipse vibes for both of the eclipses. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. We're putting out videos out several times a week. We've got live readings on Saturdays, and there's all kinds of other things that are peppered in. We're doing other videos on transit talks, and I have webinars and other things that I teach as well. So make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to book a personal reading with me, check out my link below. You can go to beyondtheveiltarot.com. You can get on my schedule, although I am booked until January right now. So if you guys want to get on, you can get in line. You can get a booked session, and we can add you to a wait list. All right, that's all for me today. You guys enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you soon. Take care.